The thing about the hospital scene is that, in the grand scope of things, or scenes that have great influence on the development of Shane and Ilya's relationship and the furthering of it thereof, it's one of the shorter moments between them, and yet it's packed filled with so much heart that we, the fans, certainly love to watch and rewatch it over and over again. I mean, when we talk about iconic lines from the show, especially this first season, which is what we've gotten so far, will you come to my cottage this summer? Don't go to Russia. Come to my house. We'll have so much fun. It's so private. No one will know. We can have a week or even two. We'll be completely alone together. Jazz hands. I'm sorry. It's such a millennial thing to do, but every time I recall that scene, I always do a jazz hands because it's so fitting. And I totally like to believe that High Off Pain Med Shane was totally doing jazz hands in his head. But as I was saying, the Will You Come to My Cottage This Summer line is hands down one of the most popular lines from the show and was gifted to us by the scene. And honestly, a part of me debated on whether or not I actually needed to film a What You Missed video for the scene because everyone has probably watched it a bajillion times. So, is there really any certainty that I can bring something new, a new perspective to it? But then I thought, this is a great reason for me to rewatch one of my absolute favorite scenes multiple times for research purposes. And also, there's so much subtext in the scene, but the one that precedes it, and this one in itself, that I figured, you know what? What the hell? I'm tossing in my analysis as well. So here you go. The one video you probably didn't need, but I'm making anyway because I really cannot stop yapping about this show. You're welcome. Of course, before I start talking about the scene, I'd like to give a quick disclaimer about this particular What You Miss series. These are just my thoughts and opinions as I watch and rewatch the show, with occasional flashes of insight that pop in due to having read the books and being a lover of them as well. However, I'm not about to proclaim myself on being the absolute authority on everything, since it's important we all remember that media is meant to be enjoyed, usually through our own interpretations and personal lenses. And as long as one isn't being bigoted or an absolute asshole, I'm usually more of a shrug, everyone is entitled to their opinions, just like I'm entitled to mine kind of girl. So thank you for giving me the space to yap about the show. And whilst we're at it, I would also like to say a big thank you to my lovely patrons and YouTube members whose support have been instrumental in helping me continue to make content, especially since I started doing this full time at the start of last year, which was the last time I was in paid employment. And a special shout out to Lena, Sherry, and Holly for their extra support. You get all the hearts and kisses too. Mwah. If you too would like to support me on Patreon or become a YouTube member to enjoy certain perks, maybe even get a shout out, the link to do so is in the description bar. And with that said and done, before we talk about the hospital scene, I do think it is important to look at what came before it, since it set the stage for the happenings that landed Shane in the hospital. I am, of course, referring to the Boston versus Montreal wild card match to decide the last team that would make it to the playoffs. Yes, the stakes are important and both teams are charged. But what hit me the most about the scene is the fact that it's what directly follows Ilya having lost his father and having to lay him to rest in Russia. You see, I've always been a fan of mirroring within storytelling, especially when it's tied to events that happen to the lead characters. We can read Ilya losing his father, which, by the way, is heralded by that moment of silence when he finally picks up Alexei's call in the locker room. And even though we all agree that Gregory Rozanov is an abusive piece of shit, the loss, nonetheless, is one that can be categorized as an emotionally devastating hit for Hillier, as it's the final nail on the coffin that confirms for him that with Gregory's death, he will never be able to gain the opportunity for or chance to win his father's favor. That is a foregone conclusion in his life, and couple that with the fact that he's dealing with the added weight that is the burden of realization that Russia isn't and can't be home for him anymore. It leaves him reeling. To follow that up with the scene where Shane then gets physically hit, once again, there's the ringing sound and then long moment of silence before sound explodes. It's such a powerful way to echo both of them brilliantly. Shane's hit is a physical act compared to Ilya's emotional one and is laid out on his ass, head ringing, barely coherent, physically reeling at everything that is happening. The juxtaposition of emotional versus physical as it comes to the two of them is just delicious. Utterly delicious writing to me. And of course, there's the quick mention of Shane still actively reaching out as he did in Tampa Bay. He's the one who offers up the code to his home, to the front door. In fact, a subtle way of affirming the fact that Ilya means more, matters more. His perception of them being together has gone beyond something fast and quick and dirty, which is signified by him constantly sneaking him in through the back door of his apartment, to Shane being willingly vulnerable and offering him front door access into his home. A subtle way to hint at the fact that Shane is all in, wanting to make things even more official, whilst of course maintaining their secret, but with the full knowledge and willingness to let Ilya see just how much Ilya matters to him. When we put this alongside his words at the hospital, we know that the offering of the door code was the first step that was meant to lead to the question that would grant Ilya unfettered access, not just to Shane's home in Montreal, but also the cottage in Quebec. Now, whilst Shane is having all of these thoughts and making these plans, things are a bit different for Ilya. Now, in the books, we are privy to Ilya's inner thoughts and are aware that Ilya's initial plan had been to break up with Shane after the match. Not because he's changed his mind following the confession he made whilst in Russia, but because of that confession. Because now that he's put his feelings into words, albeit in words that Shane cannot understand, he's realized just how deep in love with Shane he is, and the thought devastates him because of just how improbable a future of them being together is. He felt that they couldn't go anywhere, and so rather than keep Shane tied to him, his plan was to let him go. Now, I know some viewers tend to think that Grigory's death was part of the catalyst that created the avenue for Olenov, that Shane and Ilya, to be together. I'd like to point out that the loss of his father is what finally got Ilya to admit to himself that yes, he's in love with Shane, but it wasn't what convinced him to give himself and Shane a try, to allow each other to envision a possible future together. That honor belongs to Scott kissing Kip in front of the whole world after winning the Stanley Cup. Shane and Ilya being able to envision and eventually have a future together is and will always be because of Scott. Before the kiss, however, Ilya had convinced himself that the right thing to do was to break up with Shane, and then the hit happened. And that's what we see expressed in that scene with him: the shock at the hit, the pain at the hit, the realization that it feels like a part of him has been carved away with Shane being hit and him not being able to go to him to be with him, to know if he's going to be okay. The one thing that's always brought them together is what is separating them at that moment. Shane has to go to the hospital. And even though Ilya is reeling at Shane being hurt, he has to stay on the ice and finish the game because that is what is expected of him. Ilya has no idea as he forces himself to continue playing if Shane will be okay. It's all those fears, the worries and anxieties that Ilya brings with him into the hospital room. Shane, of course, at this moment is blissed out, is so delighted in the fact that Ilya is there right with him. Ilya, who trips over his words as he finally manages to ask if Shane is okay, bracing himself to hear the worst because they are hockey players. He knows how bad a hit Shane are taking, knows that lesser players have had to give up the sport for way less, knows that there is a whole list of injuries that could have arisen from the hit, and is terrified both at the thought of Shane being hurt and that the last game could have been their last. And all of that, all of those thoughts add to his terror. Now, I already said earlier that in the books, Ilya had been planning to break up with Shane after the game, but then Marlowe went and hit Shane, and that put his plans in disarray. Although, with Shane hurt and everything that had roused within him, it just further confirmed for Ilya that he was in too deep. He hadn't been able to keep calm. He had spent the entire night worried, checking up on updates to see if he can catch any smidgen of news about Shane and the condition he's in. And as one would expect from a character battling with all that anxiety and fears, Ilya once again decides that breaking up with Shane was the better idea for both of them. Of course, Shane at this point can't tell any of this. What he can sense, though, is Ilya's worries and fears about him, and because they are both players who are perfectly in sync about what the other is thinking, it's why they've been excellent rivals all these years, after all. Shane is able to guess at what Ilya wants to know and immediately assuages those fears. It's just a concussion and he fractured his collarbone. Yes, he's out for the playoffs, but as they both know and are very much aware of, it could have been so much worse. Ilya, who had braced himself for this so much worse, is relieved. But not that the transition from all that tension and pent up emotion is going to be fast and quick. He reaches for, grapples for anything to center himself, which is why it brings up Cliff and his guilt about the hit, and Shane, who we've now established with the active choices made to be more vulnerable and open with Ilya now that he's come out to Rose and to himself, is able to see that tension. He's able to see that Ilya is barely holding on, which is why he reaches for him with a hey. It's meant to be short and for, hey, are you okay? For, hey, I'm fine. Nothing happened. For, hey, we're fine. You're here. I'm here. Shane is trying to convey so much with the hey, which is why his voice rises as he reaches for Ilya to offer him comfort whilst also wanting to give himself comfort. And that is why we get the muttered better once he's able to hold Ilya's hands. And it's such a physical thing too. He feels better maintaining touch with Ilya. Same thing with Ilya reaching out to touch Shane's cheek after telling him, you scared me. They are both grounding themselves through physical touch in that moment. And it's just such a beautiful, brilliantly acted scene and portrayed so well by Hudson and Connor. And then there's the fact that even with Shane's excited, hey, Haley has to caution him to keep his voice down. That even in their moment of offering and taking comfort and solace from each other, they can't do it in a loud way so as not to be discovered. Even comfort for them has to be kept a secret for obvious reasons. And God's that just hits me in the guts. But because they are drawing comfort from each other, Ilya feels safe enough to mention that Shane's hit scared him. Ilya, who up until that moment has always portrayed the facade of being strong and capable and an asshole who gives as good as he gets and only lets down his guard around Shane and has only begun to allow himself to be truly vulnerable in Shane's presence since their time together at Tampa Bay, now is willingly sharing his fears unprompted with Shane. And Shane, who doesn't want him to focus on the worst that could have happened, pivots to what should have been a happy moment for them, is plans that he had wanted to put into play the previous night if Cliff Marlowe hadn't fucked things up for him. Of course, he has no idea at that point that Marlowe saved him from Ilya making what would have undoubtedly been a big mistake in voicing the many ways in which they can't possibly hope for a future together. So he barrels on through about what he had wanted to ask Ilya. Ilya, who can sense that things are going to spiral even further, tries to stop him, but the words gush out, spilling over, rushing over each other without a pause in between, like a dam that has been broken loose for Shane and he can't keep them blocked away anymore. Will you come to my cottage this summer? Don't go to Russia. Come to my house. We'll have so much fun. It's so private. No one will know. Ilya tries to stop him, tries to emphasize the fact that he cannot do that. They can't do that. But Shane is on a roll and just continues to bulldoze his way through. We can have a week or even two. We'll be completely alone together. Jazz hands. I find it interesting that every single time Shane has brought up Russia to Ilya and him having to go back to Russia, it's always been with an air of questioning and uncertainty. You can tell he wants to ask, that he senses the signs that Russia might not really be the best place for Ilya to go or be at in the moment, but he never quite works up the courage to ask. He has zero certainty that he will be able to convince Ilya otherwise. He's always brought up Russia as a question, like this careful line is not sure he's allowed to tread. And then the hit happens. They are in the hospital together. He's holding Ilya's hands and Ilya is touching his cheek. And the words that he's always bit his tongue around, words he's never really ever allowed himself to say, come spewing forth out of him. This summer, rather than return to the country that stopped being home for you, will you come to my home? I want to open it up for you and to you. And that hits. Because it's yet another way that we get to see the shift in their relationship, the certainty and boldness that Shane is working with. Some readers and viewers of the show like to convince themselves that Ilya is the one that takes all the initiative in their relationship, and that is clearly not the case. The hospital scene is yet another great way that we get to see Shane be the one taking the initiative, setting things up for a future he wants with Ilya, bringing them both to the point where they can be honest with each other It's so well done, so well written. Ilya, of course, cannot give an answer. Remember, his plan was to break up with Shane, and now things are getting even more complicated. So all he can say in the moment is to buy himself some time is maybe, maybe. And then the nurse walks in amidst Shane's low, oh no, because Shane knows that their moment is over. That now that an outsider is present, the vulnerability that they had cultivated, the openness with which they had talked and allowed themselves to be in each other's presence is over. Now they have to go back to pretending, to performing. And we see this displayed instantaneously. The nurse teases Ilya about him potentially wanting to smother Shane with a pillow. Ilya responds that that is good thinking on her part and says he has to leave. Shane tells him goodbye and then tells him, see you next season, in this gruffer voice, which is meant to show us that Shane is consciously masking slash performing at masculinity, reading himself of his previous vulnerability in order to hide their relationship because his softness for Ilya, which was reflected even in his voice at the moment when he's bare for everyone to see, specifically Ilya, is something that has to be protected and not shared in the presence of others. Once again, brilliant work all around. The hospital scene is absolutely one of my favorite in the season just because every time Shane and Ilya allow themselves to be vulnerable with each other, my spirit and my soul ascends. But of course, these are just my thoughts. I would, as always, love to hear yours. Whether or not you agree with me, please share them in the comments. Like this video, however, if you've watched this far and haven't done so yet, but enjoyed anything of what I had to say, share it so others can find my channel as well. Or you can check out my gaming or ASMR channels if they sound like something you might potentially, possibly be interested in. I have them both linked in the description bar. I will see you tomorrow with a new video. Until then, do remember, obsessing over the things you love, perfectly valid coping mechanism.